Alright, I'm going to try and make this quick. I bought a Logitech G920. Why did I buy the G920 and not the G923 or the G29 or something from Thrustmaster? The answer is because it was on clearance, and that's why I bought it. This is technically like a last generation model. There's like a G923 is, I guess, the newer version. And Thrustmaster makes more expensive wheels that are probably better if you're more serious into racing sims. I'm a beginner. This isn't necessarily a review of the G920 itself. It's just more a little video showing you why a beginner might want to buy any wheel in particular. But again, I bought the G920 because it was heavily discounted, primarily because it's technically a last generation model. So upon plugging this thing in, first thing you're going to see is it does a little rick and roll, spun all the way to the left, spun all the way to the right, and then it centered itself. And it stays centered. To move this thing off center requires a fair bit of force. It's got some resistance and it's fighting you. And when you let go, it centers itself. It's not always going to do that, okay? That's like just a default thing. And really it comes down to a per game basis. In most games, I find that most of the time it's not going to self-center. You can go into the driver settings and change things. You can override things. You can have it self-center if you want. You can change how strong the force feedback is. Speaking of the drivers, it also found a firmware upgrade or a firmware update. Go figure. Yes, this had a firmware update. Everything nowadays has a firmware update, but that may improve compatibility with certain games or certain performance in certain games. I'm not sure. Point is, when I plugged it in, it seemed like it worked fine, so you might think, hey, it's working. But if you don't install the drivers, you're not going to get the extra options for tweaking things, and you may not get the firmware update. So just go install the drivers. The pedal box, I was worried about the pedal box, on carpet. It requires a lot, especially the brake pedal. The brake pedal requires a lot of force to press, and if it's just going to slide around on carpet, well, that's not really any good. But they thought of that. On the bottom of the pedal box, there's like a thing at the back that you can flip out, and it's got like little spikes all over it, and those spikes dig into the carpet, and it sticks. Like, you've got to lift this thing up if you want to move it, which is great. You can put a lot of force onto the brake pedal. It's not going to just slide around. The first game I tried with this was Forza Horizon 4, mainly because it was already installed. And I bought Project Cars 2, mainly because it was cheap and it has VR support. But while I was waiting for that to download, I thought I want to try the wheel now. So I fired up Forza Horizon 4 and gave it a test. And as you can see, it works pretty well. I mean, that's not like a simulation game, and its wheel support isn't like perfect, but it let me try the wheel. I got a sense for its accuracy. I definitely got a sense for its force feedback. Again, this thing fights you, and there's times it's hard to keep the car straight because this thing is pulling all one direction or the other. All right, before we start playing Project Cars 2, I mentioned the brake pedal is very stiff. It requires a lot of force to push all the way down. And if you just do one thing before you start playing, you're going to want to calibrate the brake pedal. As you can see here, I pretty much got to stand on that brake pedal to get it to max out. And I don't want to play like that. It's way too hard to press the brake pedal, and you will never be able to stop the car. So what you want to do is press it down to the point you feel that's where you want it to max out. And the game will calibrate it for you. Pretty much necessary that you do this in games that support it. You can go into the driver settings and set it by, percentages, but it's really nice in game when you can push the pedal down to where you want it to max out. I also wanted to show the steering wheel, mentioning how it can return to center, and that's based on the game. And here you can see the steering wheel doesn't quite want to really fight fully back to center until I start moving forward, and then it centers itself. And that's very realistic to how it would be in a real, in this case, go-kart. that's cool, and it just shows the control the game can have over the wheel. All right, now let's get into the game in VR. Here we are racing go-karts in VR, and this is awesome. First of all, as you can see, it's very accurate. It's pretty much 1-to-1, and that's what you want. When you're in VR, you're in the perspective of the driver holding the steering wheel. You need something that's going to be basically a 1-to-1 representation of that. The force feedback in this game is awesome. I swear, when you hit the rubber on the track, like when you're on the race line coming into a corner where all the other go-karts have been like under heavy braking and lay down a little bit of rubber on the track, you see those dark parts on the track. That's where the grip is. When you're on that section and you're trying to turn the cart, there's a lot of resistance in the steering wheel, which is realistic. And you know, when you clip the edge of the track, you feel that in the wheel. So it does add that extra sense of being there, which you want in VR. It's fun. It was fun. It works great. That's why I bought this. I bought this to play games in VR, and it works. This was a budget option. Again, it was heavily discounted. Again, primarily because it's a last generation model. And if you're serious into race sims, you've probably spent more money on a Thrustmaster setup. But if you're watching this video because you're a beginner, like me, you're maybe not sure, I would say it's worth it. I just wanted to show some gameplay also not in VR, because this thing's awesome in VR, but honestly, it's awesome just not in VR. Just playing the game on the monitor here, it's awesome. And I gotta admit, at first, I was like, not really liking this thing. It just takes some time to get used to. And if you buy one of these and you start playing with it and you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have bought this, I wasted my money, I don't like it, just give it a little more time. Make sure you're in a racing sim that supports it well. Make sure you calibrate that brake pedal. Just give it a little bit of time to get used to. It's different. It's different than what you're used to if you've been playing with a controller. But what I find here is, as you can just see, you can see in the bottom right by the tachometer, you can see how much gas throttle I'm putting in, and you can see how much brake I'm putting in. When I'm braking, I'm very rarely putting full brake in, and that is a kind of nuance that you do have with the controller, especially if it has analog triggers, or you're using the right analog stick for throttle and brake. You always know it's there, but it's not like intuitive. You think it is, but it's not. When you go to hit the brakes, you're just gonna bottom out the right analog stick. You are. I mean, I've done it. And sure, if you think about it, you can manipulate the brakes in a way where you're not maxing out the brakes and locking up. But here, it's more natural. And once you get used to it, at first, I wasn't liking this thing. I gotta admit, it takes some time to get used to. Give it some time. I'm really liking it now, and I'm playing it not in VR more than I am in VR, and loving it. So there you go. That's the Logitech G920, or really any similar set from a beginner's point of view. See you guys later.